Will Poulter, the character that you play in Detroit, is a real tough guy to like, to say the least. I wonder how you, as an actor, found your way into this character who is, on the surface, very overtly racist and violent and bigoted. How did you find your way into him and bring him some kind of nuance or humanity?
Right. Yeah, I think on the surface, he's, as you say, a very kind of aggressive and racist person. And I didn't want to pull any punches in that respect. And I kind of saw my role in this film as the person responsible for exposing this kind of individual. And I wanted to do that as kind of unapologetically as possible. I think he is a product of entrenched racism, and for that reason, racism is entrenched in him. So it's a deep-rooted and terrifyingly ignorant, thought structure that informs everything that he does and the way that he conducts himself. We can't afford to have racist individuals operate in modern-day society, least of all in positions of power and when it comes to law enforcement. So it was really quite a tragic combination. And looking into it, don't discover any facts or any kind of logic. You're not going to come across any rational way of thinking or anything that's going to justify this. You sort of have to embrace ignorance, and you have to turn a blind eye to the truths of the matter when you look at race relations and racial history. Because what I came to discover is that much of what racist people believe in is a subversion of reality. And the reality of the matter is that white people have historically been a threat to people of color, whereas a lot of racists will wholeheartedly believe that people of color are inherently a threat to white people. So it was about turning a blind eye to the facts, embracing ignorance, as I said, and humanizing him was important to me because I wanted him to be a recognizable character in society today, just as he was a functioning and identifiable, person back in 1967, and of course a composite of several of the police officers who were there. I wanted him to feel present in society today, and it's important that we're able to identify these individuals and really make an example of them as to what we can't afford to have, in society.
When you say that, it brings up another interesting point about the movie, which is that even though it's set 50 years ago today, there are unmistakable ties to what's going on today. I mean, with unarmed black people being shot by police officers and police officers getting away with it. Can you talk a bit about the relevancy of the film to today?
Yeah, the relevance is unfortunately very strong. And that's just a fact. I think we've all been witness to a repetition of police brutality cases, cases where innocent people of color have been murdered and police officers have not been held accountable. When it comes to any comments on law enforcement, I can only speak from my experience, which is that of a white male. And so my entire perspective on law enforcement and police is founded in an experience that is unique to being a white male. And it's quite possible that I could go through my entire life and know nothing but hardworking, honest, unbiased police officers. But speaking to a lot of my colleagues in this film and friends of mine, I've learned that, that is a true privilege that comes with being white, to have those interactions and to experience unbiased protection from law enforcement. I think there are a handful of police officers that are racially motivated, and we've seen the devastating effects of racially motivated police work, and we can't afford to have that continue. And it's totally unacceptable for to get away with some of the crimes that they have in recent history, with 50 years, almost to the date of the events that are represented in this film. And to see a repetition of these themes is, completely devastating. There's a great line in the movie said by Laz Alonso, who plays Conyers, says that police criminality should be treated like any other form of criminality, and that's entirely true. I think to treat police criminality as anything different is a total travesty of justice.
I wonder what kind of research you did, given the fact that these events are 50 years apart, and I believe you said that the character was a composite of a bunch of different police officers. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
So, what kind of research did you do in order to prepare yourself for this role?
Well, I think aside from looking into, as I said, some of the kind of thoughts and theories that inform, the racist rhetoric, I also looked into police practices at that time. In 1967, the police force was 95% white, and the population was approaching 40% African American. So you can appreciate the racial bias. I looked at the kind of socio-political state of Detroit during that period and just how segregated it was. And, using the framework of a racist, I suppose what I was looking to do is take the everyday frustrations of albeit racist, but a hardworking police officer, and apply all of the blame towards one ethnicity group. And I think that is one of the things that has historically and systematically happened, is that, and it's been a sort of intrinsic part of the racist mentality, is to, blame ethnicity groups outside of one's own for really no sound or logical reason. I think what happens and what you witness in this film is you see, racist police officers taking out all of their anger and all of their frustrations on totally innocent people before they walk away effectively scot-free.
So the big crux of the film takes place at the Algiers Hotel with that horrible incident that took place. Take us on to that set. I mean, you guys are in this hotel for a long period of time. What was the feeling like on that set?
Incredibly intense. I think the material lended itself to a naturally intense and pretty focused environment. I don't think there was any way of capturing what we did without all of us being in quite a particular headspace. With that being said, however aggressive and however negative, the relationship was on screen, the entire experience was underlined with, mutual respect, genuine trust, and a feeling of safety. And that's something that is achieved by Kathryn, and I think by just the natural bond that developed with I should say, among cast members while we weren't shooting. And I'm glad we chose to do it that way. I think there's a version of events where we could have lived separated from one another and avoided each other. And of course, everyone has their own individual methods, but generally speaking, we did this as a kind of a unified group. And as soon as the cameras cut, we went back to being friends. And that's a truly lovely bonus to this whole process.
Can you talk a little bit more about working with Kathryn Bigelow and what she gave you as a director to help you get into this character and get into that headspace?
Kathryn's able to create a uniquely immersive experience for her actors. And Jojo, my colleague in this film, who does a wonderful job in the film, put it really beautifully. He said, Kathryn doesn't create moments, she captures them, which I think is very true of her process. I think rather than trying to create a sort of contrived moment of drama, she trusts her actors enough to react to the environment that she creates. And this motel was effectively lit 360 degrees. And a lot of the credit there goes to Barry Ackroyd, our incredible DOP, and his amazing camera crew. And Kathryn would allow us to really just respond to each other within the space. And that, I think, afforded us the opportunity to get some really realistic and very kind of raw material up on the screen. And as an actor, particularly at my age, I was 24 when I shot this film. And, for me, or rather 23, and, for me to walk onto a set like that, I'm fully prepared to put myself in Kathryn's hands entirely and be micromanaged. But for her to turn around and say things like, do whatever you feel is natural, you know, and feel free to improvise, and let's just keep running after the scene. You know, what a gift. You know, I feel so blessed to have had that opportunity, and it's made me really hungry to have kind of, you know, experiences similar to it. Although I'm well aware of the fact that, you know, films like this are by no means a dime a dozen, and it may be the best thing I'm ever part of.
Well, you have had some good luck in recent years. I mean, between this and working with Iñárritu on The Revenant. So, I mean, what draws you to the kinds of roles you take on, films you do?
You know, I think there has to be an emotional connection to the character that I can't quite articulate. That's a sort of internal dialogue between me and what's on the page, and it's hard to put that into words. But of course, working with, you know, great filmmakers. I mean, between Alejandro, as you mentioned, and Kathryn, and I'm currently working with Lenny Abramson. I think I've been really fortunate enough to, you know, collaborate with, you know, some of the best directors out there. So that is a true pleasure, and something, if I'm lucky enough to, you know, do in the future, I want to continue doing. And I think also, you know, I'm keen to challenge myself. I love playing away from home, as it were, and stretching myself and trying to inhabit psychologies and personalities that are very different to my own. And you know, I've had the fortune of doing that on a number of occasions, and I'm grateful. It's something I want to continue doing.
Speaking about what's on the page, I mean, this is written by Mark Boal, who's not just a great screenwriter, but he's a great journalist as well, and brings a lot of his journalistic experience to his writing. So, I mean, what did that give you as an actor? What did that add to it?
Do you know what I think it did? Is it helped to augment the authenticity of the entire project. And I think, as harrowing as it was to kind of be conscious of this, you know, all the way along, we knew that we were trying to draw attention to the lack of justice that was available for the victims of this tragedy. And so authenticity, being true to the real events, was of the utmost importance for all of the filmmakers. No more so for anyone than Kathryn. Kathryn was very keen to try and represent the real events as kind of religiously as possible. You know, I've never been on a film set before where you can be doing a scene and then the actual transcript of the events is put in front of you, and you can adapt your line in accordance with the transcript in order to make things more accurate. So when you work with someone like Mark Boal, who has so much research and so much evidence weaved into the script, you know, because, as you say, of his kind of journalistic sort of attributes, you know, it's really an amazing opportunity. Really weren't dramatizing, I don't think, as much as perhaps people think we were. I would go as far as to say is that we were probably on occasion sort of forced to kind of tone things down a little bit, because, you know, these events were truly, truly horrifying and potentially not even palatable had we kind of explored the maximums.
And it's interesting the way that the film, in its third act, in a sense, slows down. I mean, you've got the intensity of that last 90 minutes with the hotel and the riots, and then it gets into the institutional injustice of the court system. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think exploring the full spectrum of systematic racism was very important to Kathryn, and the themes of social injustice are, you know, multifaceted, and it's not as simple as, it can't be defined in a moment, like, you know, a single moment of police brutality. I think the comment that's being made, particularly in the third act of the film, is how deep rooted and just how systematic, you know, oppression is for people of color, and that social justice is, you know, denied on multiple platforms to people of color. And the really hopeless thing that I think, you know, you feel in the third act is that, you know, social justice and the right thing is not even really on the cards as soon as you step into that courtroom. You know, it's a all-white jury. It was held an hour and a half outside of town in a virtually all-white community, and you had a very aggressive lawyer leveraging, you know, that situation in order to make the odds for those people of color, you know, on the stand insurmountable. And of course, what happened to Melvin Dismukes in this entire scenario is particularly tragic. You know, a man who was in a very, very tricky position and then ended up being tried for murder. It's an unthinkable injustice.
What do you hope people take away from this movie when they see it?
Sorry, you cut out there slightly. What did you say?
I said, what do you hope people take away from this movie when you see it?
Oh, right. I probably could have put that one together myself. I've had that a few times. Do you know what? Truthfully, I really hope that it encourages people to learn a little bit more, you know, and educate themselves where they lack knowledge. You know, I personally hold my hands up and I can, you know, quite confidently say that I lack some very critical knowledge. You know, I thought I knew my stuff when it came to at least identifying racism, and I certainly knew how I felt about racists. But until I learned more about the white role in racial history, and I came to terms with my white privilege and, you know, the unearned privilege that I have versus the kind of undeserved suffering of other people, you know, I didn't really truly develop the empathy and understanding that I needed. So I'm hoping that after this film, people will be encouraged to talk with one another. They'll be more empathetic of the experiences that people ethnicity group have in life. And the first step in progression is developing one's knowledge. You know, until you've done a bit of reading, done a bit of watching, done a bit of listening, whatever format it may take, until we've bettered our knowledge of the current state of affairs, how do we improve them in the future?
Well, it's a really great movie, and congratulations on it. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
Cheers, man.